The judgment of the stellar assembly, the great chamber of the stellar assembly stretched before Ambassador Diana Cross like a vast cathedral of judgment. Crystalline walls rose hundreds of meters into the air, their surfaces pulsing with soft, bioluminescent patterns that reflected the mood of the gathered representatives. Today, those patterns flickered with shades of amber and deep red, colors that meant displeasure and concern in the universal chromatic language of the assembly. Diana stood alone at the center of the chamber, a single human figure surrounded by the representatives of 63 alien civilizations. The Kalenthi delegation sat in their floating meditation spheres, their translucent bodies shifting between blue and purple as they communicated through color changes. The massive Droken warriors filled their reinforced section, their forearms crossed in what Diana had learned was a gesture of finality. Even the peaceful Merothi, usually supporters of human endeavors, kept their feathered crests flat against their elongated skulls. For 12 years, Diana had walked these halls as Earth's voice in the galaxy's most powerful governing body. She had negotiated trade agreements that brought prosperity to dozens of worlds. She had helped broker peace between warring species and had been instrumental in establishing the Assembly's first interspecies research initiatives. But today, she was not here as a diplomat. Today, she was here as the accused, prime adjudicator. Nexus of the Vorthak Empire rose from the central dais, his serpentine form coiling upward until his three-eyed head towered above the assembly floor. The Vorthok had been among the founding species of the Stellar Assembly 800 years ago, and their natural longevity meant that Nexus himself had been present at that historic moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries, and the authority of a civilization that had seen the rise and fall of countless species. Ambassador Cross, Nexus began. His words translated instantly into the neural implant that all assembly representatives carried. Humanity stands accused of violations of the expansion accords, the military limitation treaties, and the cultural preservation mandates. How do you answer these charges? Diana had known this day would come. For the past 5 years, she had watched the growing concern among assembly members as humanity spread across the galaxy with unprecedented speed. What other species accomplished over centuries, humans seemed to achieve in decades. While the assembly had been content to govern their existing territories, humanity had been exploring, colonizing, and expanding at a rate that made many of their alien neighbors nervous. The charges were read in excruciating detail. Humanity had established colonies in 47 star systems over the past decade, far exceeding the growth rate recommended by assembly guidelines. They had built a fleet of over 2,000 starships, including military vessels that pushed the boundaries of what the assembly considered appropriate for a member species. Most concerning to many delegates, humanity had refused to adopt the standardized governmental and cultural practices that other assembly members had embraced in the name of galactic unity. Representative Zith of the Aquarian Collective spoke first among the accusers. Her water-filled containment suit bubbled and hissed as she gestured with tentacles that sparkled with bioluminescent fury. The humans expand like a plague across the galaxy, she declared. They establish colonies without consulting neighboring systems. They build ships of war while claiming to be explorers. They maintain their primitive national divisions instead of embracing the unified governance that brings peace to civilized worlds. Others joined the chorus of complaints. The ethereal consortium complained that human psionics were undisciplined and potentially dangerous. The Silicon Commonwealth accused humanity of hoarding rare earth elements needed for galactic infrastructure. projects. The Jade Empire claimed that human cultural exports were corrupting the carefully maintained traditions of younger species. Diana listened to each accusation with growing frustration. Every charge was technically accurate, but none of the accusers seemed to understand why humans behaved the way they did. They saw expansion as aggression, when humans saw it as survival. They interpreted military preparedness as warmongering, when humans saw it as the responsible protection of their citizens. They viewed cultural diversity as chaos, when humans saw it as the very foundation of creativity and progress. When the accusations finally ended, Nexus turned his ancient gaze back to Diana. You have heard the concerns of your fellow assembly members. What is humanity's response to these charges? Diana took a deep breath and stepped forward. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, crafting careful diplomatic language that might somehow bridge the gap between human nature and alien expectations. But standing here, surrounded by the representatives of species that had chosen security over growth and conformity over innovation, she realized that careful diplomacy would not save her people. Honored representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, I do not deny the facts presented here today. Humanity has indeed expanded rapidly across the galaxy. We have built a substantial fleet of starships. We have maintained our diverse governmental and cultural systems rather than adopting assembly standards. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Many had expected Diana to offer excuses or justifications, not a direct admission. But I reject completely the characterization of these actions as crimes against galactic civilization, Diana continued. Everything humanity has done, we have done in accordance with our nature as a species and our rights as members of this assembly, Nexus's middle. I focused intently on Diana, while his outer eyes continued to scan the reactions of the other delegates. Explain your meaning, Ambassador. Diana turned slowly, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. For 800 years, this assembly has maintained peace through careful balance and controlled growth. Each species has found their niche, established their role, and settled into comfortable patterns of existence. This has indeed brought stability to much of the galaxy. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. But humanity is not 800 years old as a galactic civilization. We have been among the stars for less than a century. We have not yet found our niche, because we are still discovering what we are capable of becoming. The expansion you fear is not aggression, it is exploration. The ships you call warlike are protection for the families who dare to make new homes. Among unknown stars, the diversity you see as chaos is the very source of our strength and innovation. Representative Zithsuit bubbled more aggressively. Pretty words, Ambassador, but they do not address the threat your species poses to galactic stability. Your rapid expansion destabilizes established trade routes. Your military buildup threatens the careful balance of power we have maintained for centuries. Diana smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. You speak of threats and destabilization, but I see something different when I look at the state of our galaxy. I see stagnation. I see entire civilizations that have stopped dreaming of what they might become. I see species so committed to maintaining the status quo that they have forgotten how to grow. The chamber erupted in angry sounds from dozens of different species. Clicks, whistles, harmonic drones, and subsonic rumbles filled the air as representatives expressed their outrage at Diana's words. Nexus raised two of his arms, calling for silence. You dare to insult the achievements of civilizations that mastered space travel before your species had discovered fire? Nexus demanded. I dare to tell the truth, Diana replied, without backing down. When was the last time any assembly species made a major technological breakthrough? When did any of your civilizations last discover a new principle of physics or develop a revolutionary new form of art? You have achieved stability, yes, but at the cost of progress. She gestured toward the crystalline walls around them. This chamber is beautiful, and it is ancient, and it is exactly the same as it was when my species first joined this assembly 12 years ago. Nothing has changed because nothing is allowed to change. You have mistaken stillness for peace and conformity for harmony. The Droken war leader Thakvor spoke for the first time, his voice like grinding stone. The human speaks of progress as if change is always good. We have seen what unchecked growth and innovation can bring. Wars that consume entire star systems, weapons that can crack planets. We chose stability because we learned the price of chaos. Diana nodded respectfully to the massive warrior. Commander Thakvoa, I honor the wisdom of your species and the peace you have helped maintain. But consider this, in the 12 years humanity has been part of this assembly, how many wars have we started? How many planets have we conquered? How many species have we enslaved or destroyed? Thakvioas for arms uncrossed slightly. The answer was obvious to everyone in the chamber. Humanity had been involved in no major conflicts during their membership. They had conquered no one and enslaved no one. Yet in those same 12 years, Diana continued, human scientists have developed medical techniques that have saved millions of lives across dozens of species. Human engineers have designed more efficient star drives that have reduced travel time throughout assembly space by 30%. Human artists have created works that have inspired cultural renaissance on worlds that had not seen new art forms in centuries. She turned back to Nexus. You accuse us of threatening galactic stability, but I submit that we have enhanced it. The question is not whether humanity poses a threat to your way of life. The question is whether your way of life poses a threat to humanity's future. The chamber fell silent. For long moments, the only sound was the gentle hum of the environmental systems that kept the diverse atmospheres separated and comfortable for all species present. Finally, Nexus spoke. The Assembly will now vote on the future of humanity's membership. All species in favor of maintaining humanity's current status and rights within the Stellar Assembly. Diana watched as the voting displays around the chamber lit up. The Mirathi voted in favor, their feathered crests rising in a gesture of support. A few smaller species followed suit, but the overwhelming majority of representatives cast negative votes. The vote is recorded, Nexus announced, by a margin of 57-6. The Assembly has decided that humanity's membership in the Stellar Assembly is terminated, effective immediately. Diana felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression calm. She had known this outcome was likely, but experiencing it still felt like a physical blow. Nexus continued, by ancient law and assembly precedent, humanity is granted 10 standard years to withdraw all human presence from assembly space. After this period, any human found within assembly territory will be considered an unlawful trespasser and will be dealt with accordingly. 10 years. Diana's mind raced as she calculated the magnitude of the task ahead. There were over 3 billion humans living in assembly space, spread across 47 star systems. Moving them all would require the largest evacuation in galactic history. Do you understand these terms, former Ambassador Cross? Nexus asked. Diana straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the prime adjudicator. I understand the terms perfectly, but I want every member of this assembly to understand something as well. She raised her voice so that it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. You are making the greatest mistake in the history of this assembly. For 12 years, humanity has tried to be good galactic citizens. We have followed your rules, respected your customs, and contributed to your civilization. We did this because we believed in the dream of a united galaxy where all species could thrive together. Diana paused, her eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. But you have taught us today that you do not want partners. You want subjects. You do not want diversity. You want conformity. You do not want growth. You want stagnation. Her voice grew stronger with each word. Very well. You want us to leave your space. We will leave. You want us to take our dangerous ideas and our disruptive innovations away from your carefully ordered galaxy. We will take them. But do not think for a moment that exiling us will solve your problems. She smiled again, and this time there was something in her expression that made even the mighty Droken warriors lean back in their seats. You are not getting rid of a problem. You are creating something far more significant than that. For 12 years, we have been bound by your laws, limited by your treaties, and restricted by your fear of change. You are about to set us free. Diana turned toward the great doors of the chamber. 10 years from now, when the last human ship leaves assembly, space, you will discover what humanity can accomplish when we are not held back by the timid and the fearful. And someday, when your carefully maintained order begins to crumble under the weight of its own stagnation, you will remember this day as the moment you chose decline over progress. With that, Diana Cross walked from the great chamber for the last time, her footsteps echoing in the profound silence she left behind. Behind her, 63 alien civilizations began to contemplate what they had just unleashed upon the galaxy. The Great Exodus begins. 6 months had passed since the judgment, and the Terran Coordination Center hummed with activity hours a day. Located on Luna, Earth's ancient moon, the facility had been hastily expanded from a simple colonial administration office into the nerve center of the largest population movement in galactic history. Fleet Admiral Rebecca Stone stood before a holographic display that showed the current status of humanity's far-flung colonies, each system represented by a pulsing dot of light. Red dots indicated colonies still within assembly space that needed evacuation. Blue dots marked independent human settlements beyond assembly borders. Green dots showed the new worlds that had been identified as potential destinations for the massive relocation effort. The numbers were staggering. 3 billion humans lived in assembly space across 47 star systems. Moving them all within 10 years would require not just ships and resources, but a complete rethinking of how interstellar transportation worked. Traditional colony ships could carry perhaps 50,000 people at most, and the journey between star systems took months, even with the most advanced drives. At that rate, humanity would need over 60,000 ships making continuous round trips to complete the evacuation on time. The logistics are actually impossible using conventional methods, Dr. Marcus Chen explained to the assembled planning committee. As humanity's chief technology officer for the relocation effort, Chen had been tasked with finding solutions to problems that had never been attempted before. We need to transport not just people, but entire civilizations, cities, industrial infrastructure, scientific facilities, cultural archives. everything that makes these colonies home. Admiral Stone studied the holographic display showing shipping routes and cargo manifests. What are our alternatives? Dr. Chen activated a new section of the display, showing technical specifications for ship designs that existed only in computer simulations. We build ships specifically for this task. Not colony vessels designed for exploration, but purpose-built population transporters. Ships that can carry 500,000 people per journey with all their essential possessions and equipment. Governor Isabella Martinez, leader of the massive colony on New Andalusia, participated in the meeting via quantum link from her world orbiting the star. Kepler 442. Her image flickered slightly as the communication beam crossed the vast distances of space. Dr. Chen, what you're describing would be the largest starships ever constructed. The Assembly would certainly see them as a military threat. The Assembly has already expelled us, Admiral Stone pointed out. Their opinion of our ship designs is no longer relevant. Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. Exactly. For the first time in decades, we can build ships according to human specifications rather than assembly regulations. We can use our own technology, our own materials, and our own design philosophy. The difference was more significant than most people realized. Assembly shipbuilding standards prioritized longevity and standardization over innovation and efficiency. Ships were expected to operate for centuries without major modifications, which meant they were built with massive redundancies and overly conservative safety margins. Assembly vessels were also required to use standardized components that could be serviced at any major port, which limited the types of advanced technologies that could be incorporated. Human engineers had chafed under these restrictions for years. They had developed more efficient fusion reactors that were prohibited because they didn't match assembly technical standards. They had designed advanced life support systems that could support larger populations in smaller spaces, but couldn't implement them because they required specialized maintenance. They had even created new forms of faster-than-light communication that could reduce message transmission times by 80%. But assembly regulations required all interstellar communications to use the established quantum relay network. We're not just building evacuation ships, Dr. Chen continued, his excitement growing as he explained the possibilities. We're building the foundation of a new kind of human civilization. Ships that can be reconfigured for different missions. Modular habitats that can be quickly assembled into space stations or planetary cities. Manufacturing systems that can produce everything from computer components to agricultural equipment using raw materials from asteroids or planetary mining operations. The evacuation plan that emerged over the following weeks was unlike anything attempted in galactic history. Rather than simply moving people from point A to point B, humanity would be conducting a complete technological and social transformation during the relocation process. The first phase involved the construction of massive shipyards in the outer systems of Earth's solar system, far from assembly observation. Asteroid mining operations, already well established by human companies, were expanded to provide the raw materials needed for the construction effort. Automated factories were built in the zero-gravity environment of space, where they could construct ship components on a scale impossible on any planetary surface. The new ships that emerged from these yards were marvels of human engineering. The Exodus-class population transporters were 3 kilometers long and could house 600,000 people in comfortable accommodations, unlike the cramped colony. Ships of previous eras, these vessels contained complete ecosystems with parks, lakes, and even small forests. They were designed not just to transport people, but to serve as temporary homes during the years-long process of establishing new colonies. But the population transporters were only part of the fleet. Heavy cargo vessels carried the industrial equipment needed to establish manufacturing on new worlds. Science ships transported research facilities and the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. Even the escort vessels that protected the convoys were revolutionary, incorporating weapons and defensive systems that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. The assembly watched these developments with growing alarm. Intelligence reports filtered back to the Stellar Assembly describing human shipyards that operated at impossible speeds and vessels that seemed to violate established engineering principles. Some assembly members began to question whether expelling humanity had been wise. Representative Zith of the Aquarian Collective was among the first to express concerns. "The humans are not simply evacuating," she reported to an emergency session of the Assembly Security Council. "They are building a fleet that rivals the combined naval forces of a dozen assembly worlds. If their intent was peaceful colonization, why do they need so many warships?" Prime Adjudicator Nexus remained unmoved by such concerns. "The humans are leaving assembly space as required. What they do beyond our borders is not our concern." But privately, even Nexus was beginning to wonder if the Assembly had underestimated humanity's capabilities. The reports coming from human space described technological advances that should have taken decades to develop. Fusion reactors that operated at efficiency levels thought to be theoretically impossible. Faster-than-light drives that could push ships to speeds that would make them invisible to most tracking systems. Manufacturing processes that could turn raw asteroids into finished starships in a matter of months. The first major evacuation convoy departed 18 months after the Assembly judgment. The destination was a cluster of star systems beyond the galactic rim that human explorers had discovered but never colonized. The region was rich in resources but lay far from any established trade routes, making it unattractive to most assembly species but perfect for humanity's purposes. Governor Martinez led this first wave of evacuees, taking with her the entire population of New Andalusia, along with the world's advanced agricultural and manufacturing infrastructure. The journey took for months, but when the convoy arrived at its destination, the passengers had not simply endured the trip. They had used the time to plan their new civilization, design their new cities, and prepare for the challenges of building a society from scratch. The world they chose for their new home was harsh, but full of potential. Designated as Terra Nova, it orbited a young star with abundant energy and possessed mineral resources that exceeded anything found in assembly space. Within 6 months of arrival, the colonists had established not just a settlement, but a thriving industrial center that was already producing goods for trade with other human colonies. Dr. Chen observed the construction from orbit, watching as automated systems assembled cities with a speed that would have amazed assembly engineers. "We're not just relocating," he mused to Admiral Stone during one of their regular progress reviews. "We're evolving. Every challenge we face is forcing us to develop new solutions, new technologies, new ways of thinking about what's possible." The Admiral nodded, her attention focused on reports from other evacuation convoys. The second wave had established a new colony in a system rich with rare earth elements essential for advanced electronics. The third had found a world perfect for scientific research, with unique atmospheric conditions that would allow experiments impossible on Earth or any assembly world. Each new settlement added something valuable to humanity's growing capabilities. But perhaps the most significant development was not technological but social. The shared challenge of the evacuation was forging bonds between human communities that had been separated by vast distances for decades. Scientists from Earth worked alongside farmers from frontier worlds. Engineers from the inner colonies collaborated with miners from the outer systems. Cultural barriers that had persisted for generations began to dissolve as people worked together toward a common goal. "We're becoming something new," Governor Martinez reported during a conference call that included human leaders from across the galaxy, not just Americans or Europeans or Asians who happen to live on different worlds, but something that transcends our old national and cultural divisions. We're becoming truly human for the first time. The transformation was visible in everything from art to architecture. New colonies incorporated design elements from dozens of human cultures, creating cities that were uniquely beautiful while remaining utterly practical. Music and literature began to reflect themes that resonated across all human settlements, regardless of their origins. Even language was evolving, with new words and expressions emerging to describe experiences that were common to all evacuees. By the third year of the evacuation, it became clear that humanity was not simply relocating to avoid assembly restrictions. They were building something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization that combined the diversity and creativity of human culture with technology and organizational capabilities that exceeded anything the assembly had achieved. The ships arriving at the new colonies carried not just people and equipment, but ideas and innovations that transformed every world they touched. Agricultural techniques developed on one world were shared with others, increasing food production across all human settlements. Manufacturing processes perfected in one system were transmitted to others, creating an interconnected network of industrial capability that could produce anything needed by the growing communities. Most importantly, the evacuation was revealing. The true scope of human potential were not constrained by external limitations. Free from assembly regulations and expectations, human scientists and engineers were pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. Their achievements were beginning to attract attention from non-assembly species who had never before encountered such rapid technological advancement. Admiral Stone reviewed the latest intelligence reports with a mixture of pride and concern. "We're succeeding beyond our wildest projections," she told Dr. Chen. "But we're also creating something that will fundamentally change the balance of power in this galaxy. The Assembly expelled us because they thought we were a threat to their stability. They have no idea what they've actually unleashed." Dr. Chen pulled up a tactical display showing the current disposition of human forces across known space. Blue dots now outnumbered red dots by 3-1, and each blue dot represented not just a colony, but a growing center of innovation and industry. "Maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs," he said. "The Assembly has maintained peace through stagnation. Perhaps it's time for peace through progress instead." As the third year of evacuation drew to a close, humanity stood at a crossroads. They had successfully established dozens of new colonies and were well ahead of schedule for completing the required withdrawal from assembly space. But more importantly, they had discovered that exile had not weakened them. It had revealed their true strength. The galaxy would never be the same.